Welcome to today's webinar. It is hosted by Microsoft and presented by us here at the CRM team. The topic of today's webinar is Omni-Channel a reality? And what does this mean for you? My name is Paul Slade and I'm the CEO here at the CRM team. And today with me, I have Wynand Roos, who is our head of digital transformation and innovation. Wynand has years of experience in the space and has used technology to make this real for companies of all kinds across the world. And I can't wait to hear what Wynand has to say about the topic, as well as to see the demos that he's prepared for the webinar today. In the agenda, we're going to be looking at 4 different things. First, your customer expects something different. What is that? And then how do you take advantage of it? And then ultimately, we'll be going into some demos, some live demos, looking at the software that Microsoft have put together in terms of their platform and what that enables for companies. And then we'll have a look at some of the resources and links that people can get hold of. And ultimately, wrapping up with about 15 minutes of Q&A. So get your questions ready as the webinar rolls on and be prepared to ask those. We'll answer those live as we go through. So let's get started. We mentioned that customers really do expect something different, but it's so important for companies to understand exactly how they engage their customers right now. And we put together a very simple model. And this model works no matter which kind of company you're in or which industry you serve. And yes, the terminology may be different, but remember that every single business really should put the customer at the middle of everything that they do. And there's really just 4 departments or 4 areas of the business that engage that customer: marketing, sales, delivery, and customer service. Now, yes, your naming conventions might be different, but fundamentally the marketing team's job is to attract new prospects closer to the business. Once they're qualified in some way, they get handed over to the sales team, and the sales team have one job: acquire that customer for the company, for our business. Once that's done, marketing and sales have made some promises to that customer, and someone in the business has to make sure that they fulfill on that promise. And that's typically the delivery team, whether that's something picked out of a warehouse or it's some kind of a professional service that might need to be offered. And ultimately, once that's been completed, you need to be able to service your customer really effectively. And we always say that this is a huge problem in so many companies that we see, because they don't understand that service is actually to retain and grow your customer. And it's not a linear process. It's one that happens in an ongoing fashion, because the better you are at that, the better you can upsell and cross-sell your customer over a period of time. Now, all of these different departments engage their customer through a number of different channels. And it's critical that companies understand those channels and become aware of how to deal with those customers, but most importantly, also have all of that information in one place. But as we said, customer service and the requirements that customers have has changed. And we've seen an evolution in the way that companies have delivered service to their customers over the last few years. I mean, we have a real, I suppose, past and future state here. And in some of these instances, a few years ago, companies really expected technology to transform the way they engage their customers. And it may have in some cases, but we also saw a lot where the technology actually made the engagement worse. A website that wasn't mobile friendly and you couldn't get the information you wanted. I mean, there's so many of those kinds of scenarios, but there's a future picture there. And that future picture is where technology truly does deliver on the promise it was making for all of these years, and allows that entire experience to come together and really deliver on what the customer actually needs. But that's just one of those changes. I mean, the other one is, when is a company open in order to service their customers? What have you seen change there, Wynand?
Nowadays, as a customer and as a consumer myself, I expect the service to be 24/7. I want to sit in my bed at 9 o'clock at night and request a quote, for example, or I want to complain and I want someone to respond. The thing that I've seen here, though, is not all companies can have a contact center running 24/7. We can't all serve or have employees that work around the clock. The important thing there is to manage the expectation of the customer, to ensure that they actually know what your service hours are and how responsive you will ultimately be. What is quite important is, if someone wants to get a quote after hours or log a complaint or log a query, you should still capture that information. So the next morning, the first person that gets into the office can actually pick up that request and serve that customer during those office hours.
It's interesting. I mean, go back just a few years and the only option you had was 9 to 5. And that's changed. We now get into this 24/7 type scenario, even if it's a different channel and information's available in a different way. As you said, it's that balance. But companies looked at this from such an operational point of view initially, and they worried about what their process was. And they said, we want to control how a customer can interact with us. We're in charge. And we always know that that's not the truth. If you aren't dealing with your customer the right way, you're going to find out pretty quickly. So the future version of this is really that the customer is in control of how and when they want to interact with the company, which is really challenging because you need to accommodate for that. But we also find scenarios where customers really, in the old days, had to repeat all of the information that they were trying to provide to the company when they moved to a different channel. There is nothing more frustrating than that.
I love how you use the word "the old days." It's not quite the old days. I still find it in most of the contact center experiences that I personally have, that as soon as I get transferred from one agent to the next, I have to tell my soppy sad story all over again.
So now what do we move to? I mean, the ideal state in the future is that every company that we're dealing with as a consumer has this ability to know exactly what my soppy story was, regardless of where I started telling that story and regardless of which channel.
Exactly. You need to be channel aware. So whatever happened on social and the conversations that I've had on that social channel should also be exposed through the person that deals with email or the person that picks up the call. They should be able to, within a few seconds, get an understanding of what has happened over this timeline. And you know, before I actually have to explain what my requirement is, they should just confirm their understanding of what my requirement is at that point in time.
As we know, more and more companies are starting to do this really, really well. And some of them are the ones that we've been helping over time. So we're going to see some of that in your demo later on. But we've also seen a scenario where in the past, call center volumes were extremely high. We also know that that is the most expensive way to service a customer. What happens in the future?
Well, we need to deflect these customers. It's all about cost reduction. And this is where mobile messaging, the volume there becomes high. We need to cater for channels like WhatsApp. We need to be able to cater for channels on the social front so we can really see that our deflection strategies are working and that customers are consuming these different high volume messaging channels.
That deflection is going to come up later on today as well. But as you look at deflection, obviously providing other content and information around from a website perhaps, or automated emails that go back to the customer based on the content that they've just provided and the kind of requests that they've made, that's critical. I mean, in the old days, what we really saw there was customers really having to find content. They went fishing all over the place to try and find out what they needed. The worst thing that would happen is that they would find that content on someone else's site, something like maybe a complaining site, and they can go and say, I had this really bad experience. They can see other consumers have had something similar, or someone else has tried to solve the problem. But what we see in the future is more and more times that the content will find the customer based on their need.
The marketeers that are getting it right really understands inbound-based marketing. So they go and segment and target customers with the right collateral and the right information so that the information actually finds the customer, as opposed to the customer trying to look and get lost in other people's sites, for example. That's such an important comment to make.
It's the same with product. We'll find that in the old days, the customer had to decide what kind of product they were looking for. They did all the research. They would try and decide which camera or whatever that was that they would actually need. And it was all on them to do all of that deciphering of what they needed. We're seeing that change now where the product is beginning to find the customer based on their simple needs, the things that they're actually saying to us via any of these different channels, and the product recommendations changing as a result. Sometimes it's even just that basket of products. What about this? What about that lens? Or what about this kind of case, etc.? And it sort of bundles that together for you.
I think something else here is that products are actually starting to fix themselves. You've got self-resolution processes that I go through leveraging knowledge bases or IoT-based services where, as opposed to logging a complaint around a product, the product will find the solution themselves without the customer even knowing about it.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, the other thing is that once those things begin to service themselves, it takes more of that workload off these people that are sitting in the contact centers working so hard to deliver great customer service. In the old days, they were working across 10 or whatever different systems. We used to call that swivel chairing or that alt-tab syndrome, and they were having to look into different systems to get the information that they needed to provide the service level that the customer needed as well. And that just meant more time, more cost, more pain, and probably not a great experience for the customer. In future, again, that changes.
Indeed. We now have single agent desktops. As a contact center agent, I can log on to a single application that, based on the context of the information that I'm dealing with, it will actually render all of the relevant applications to service that customer's request all at once.
So we mentioned that in our CRM model earlier on, it wasn't a linear process. It happened over and over and over again. And because marketing is so closely aligned to the effect that customer service has on our customer base, the old days saw that customer service had no budget and weren't able to release that. But now what we're beginning to see is that customer service are tapping into marketing's budget because their function begins to help us upsell and cross-sell into our customers.
Once an organization understands that service is about retention and growth, that makes perfect sense, because then ultimately what we're now doing is we're using propensity-based models to, when a customer has a specific query or a specific incident or is about to churn, the model intervenes and we retain that customer at that point where they're planning to churn, and ultimately grow the services through selling them products that are relevant to them at that point in time.
So, Vanna, what happens if companies don't embrace the future and make the change?
We know that they deliver horrible service, and our research shows that 71% of customers end their relationships with companies because of this poor service. When we look at the stats and the research, we also know that a third of companies do not know where the customer conversation even started because they can't track the customer journey. We also see that 85% of companies will offer omni-channel customer service by 2020. If you don't get this right, your competitors will.
This is pretty scary stuff, because we're saying that we know if a customer has poor service, they will leave, and they have options. But what we're also saying, you made a comment earlier about how important it was to understand the customer journey and map your technology and processes to that. Now we're saying that loads of companies don't even know. A third of companies do not know where that engagement began and where it actually went in terms of the customer journey. And ultimately, as you say, a load of companies are going to start getting this right by 2020. And if it is not you, it's probably your competitors, which is not a good sign given the earlier stats. But Vanna, what we're saying here is that the technology stack we're going to be talking about a bit later on today can really help a company transform the way they deliver service in the future. That said, we've gone into a number of different customers over the last year and a half, maybe 2 years, and we've spoken to them, and in some cases they've said, we have an omni-channel strategy. And when we've evaluated it, what's come out is that they have a multi-channel strategy. What is the difference between multi-channel and omni-channel?
It's actually quite straightforward. An omni-channel environment means that it's channel aware. And what we mean by that is when a interaction was initiated through an email or through a social engagement, by the time a contact center agent or a bot touches that information, it is already aware of what has led up to that specific point in time. So it uses the contextual information to then proactively engage with that customer when that interaction happens, as opposed to just servicing multiple channels. For example, email and the group that service that channel don't even speak to the group that services the web chat channel or the telephony channel. These people don't sit together, they don't work in the same environment per se. Never mind the fact that the systems don't have that contextual view or that timeline of what has taken place to lead up to that point.
So multi-channel is many conversations happening across many different channels, whereas omni-channel is one conversation that happens across different channels. So let's dive a bit deeper into omni-channel. And I think, as I've just mentioned, it's about having one conversation across multiple channels. And while we're really trying to make sure that the customer has incredible service levels from the company that they're dealing with, we also want to understand that this is an opportunity to reduce our costs while servicing a customer. So it's a double whammy. We win on both sides. Better customer service and a reduced cost in order to service those customers. So there's a number of different channels that we think about, and we want to use the least complex, lowest cost items to service the customer in the early stages of their request. And as that request hits maybe a bit of a barrier, or it's not quite fulfilling the requirement that's needed, you want to bump them up to the next channel that might then help them actually get the information that they need. But what's interesting here is that it doesn't have to be, again, a linear process. You can begin to learn that, hey, this is a VIP customer. Let's not waste time. Let's get them to jump through to the actual advisor on the end of the telephone that can actually help solve that problem for them, or figure out that some customers maybe have a little bit more of a tricky situation. And again, skip a couple of levels, get them on that call, hit the co-browse, maybe do the chat session, and just give them the resolution that they need. Again, learning from that process, rolling it back into the business's knowledge base, and beginning to disseminate that through all of the different agents and channels in order to deliver great customer service. So let's take a look at how we make that real. And it sometimes feels like an insurmountable task, such a big thing that has to happen, when in actual fact, most companies we deal with in the early stages have a multi-channel capability. What happens next is that they use Microsoft Unified Service Desk in order to bring all those channels together in one agent desktop. And the next steps are pretty simple. They then use Timeline, which actually then lets them see exactly where that customer began their interaction. It captures all of that information all the way through and gives the agent a contextual understanding of what that customer is looking to do and helps them improve their service delivery. The next is that you want to enable scripting, because scripting gives you consistency across all of your teams and all of your agents to make sure that your customers have the best experience possible. What I love about scripting is that you can take the learning from each of these agents and their interaction over time, and you can start to take the best parts of that and spread it across the entire business. But ultimately, you begin to enable the AI capability from within the Microsoft platform, which helps you change the way that you're servicing customers fundamentally. Unified Service Desk sits on top of the Microsoft suite of products. These are investments that you've already made inside of your business, and they really leverage the power of Azure. Power BI, Power Apps, Microsoft Flow, Office 365 for productivity, the tools that you know and love, as well as Microsoft Dynamics 365. This is the product stack that enables you to deliver the omni-channel type of solutions that you need to, bearing in mind that the AI capability is already baked into this product stack. You're going to be seeing this demoed to you in just a second by Vaynant.
As Paul mentioned, Microsoft released Unified Service Desk as part of the Dynamics suite to provide a single agent desktop environment that consolidates multiple applications into a single environment. I would like to thank Neil Parkhurst for the use of his USD accelerator, which we will use in this demo. In our demo scenario, we will assist Susan Fine, an existing customer that would like to extend her portfolio with life insurance. When she does not find the information she requires on our website, she will interact with our FAQ bot. When the bot fails to address her needs, she will be prompted to start an online chat. The service agent will then guide Susan's navigation of our website with a co-browse chat session. Before our agent can wrap up the call, he will receive a phone call from a prospect. Our agent will then assist using multiple sessions. Our demo starts with Susan browsing our Dynamics 365 enabled website. She navigates to forums and to my support before she queries our FAQ bot. Susan wants to know if she still meets the requirements for life insurance. I know, just bear with me, you'll see Susan in just a second. When the bot fails to address Susan's requirement, it senses that she's getting frustrated by using the built-in sentiment analysis and prompts Susan to start a web chat with one of our experienced agents. Susan gets prompted with a pre-chat survey in order to ensure that she gets routed to the agent with the right skill set to handle her request. She completes the survey and the contact center agent gets notified of that specific request. As soon as the agent accepts the chat, he gets prompted with a call script to ensure consistent professional conduct. The agent welcomes Susan using the script provided and opens her contact record identified by the details provided in the pre-chat survey. When Susan's record is selected, you will notice that the script area changes contextually in order for the agent to take the correct actions based on Susan's requirements. The agent goes through Susan's timeline to familiarize herself or himself with the journey leading up to this request. He or she also perused the chat activity in order to get an understanding of her actions on the website before she started the chat. Susan responds to the chat, explaining that she cannot log onto her profile in order to complete the online application form. The agent initiates a co-browse session and shows Susan where to click and which parts of the form to complete. This resolves Susan's issue, but before the agent can wrap up the call, he receives a telephone call from Thandi, a new prospect that requires feedback on her application. The agent can seamlessly navigate between sessions to resolve the customer queries. That was a quick demo highlighting some of the Dynamics 365 Omni-Channel capabilities.
So what you saw in those demos is us using the Microsoft suite of products in order to deliver a true omni-channel capability for companies just like you. Thank you so much for showing us those demos, Vaynant. Really appreciate that. We're going to be opening up to a Q&A now, so feel free to add your questions into the chat box, and we're going to answer those live right now.